Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to the Bitcoin Stoa and to episode number 4 of the Bitcoin Stoa and to episode number 4 of School of Coin, which is a show that Eddie and I are doing our best to create 21 episodes for those who are curious about Bitcoin and want to begin the learning process. And as a new way to timestamp podcast recording sessions, we're now going to be mentioning Moscow time at the start of every episode. I just learned about Moscow time yesterday. I think it's awesome. And for those who don't know, Moscow time is how many sats you can buy for $1, as well as the current block being mined. And so current Moscow time is 1591 at block 706,033. So 1591 at 706,033. I also want to give a shout out to Roxanne, who gifted me this awesome shirt. For those listening, I'm currently wearing a shirt with a rainbow unicorn who is shitting Bitcoin. So big fan. Thanks, Roxanne. And as a reminder, the Bitcoin Store is a community-funded platform. So if you enjoy listening, you can support the project by sending some sats to the QR code at our homepage at bitcoinstoa.com. And you can also now stream sats using the Breeze app, which has a really cool podcast feature that lets you essentially stream sats directly to content creators as you're listening. So pretty cool. With that said, today's episode, we will be answering the question and doing our best to answer the question, what is Bitcoin? And this is actually a really hard question to answer because Bitcoin is many things, depending on who you are, how you're using Bitcoin, and sort of how concrete or philosophical you want to get. But Eddie and I have each narrowed down our best 3 answers to that question based on the target audience of who's listening to the show. And we're going to unpack each of them today. So, actually, even just something to mention, the fact that Bitcoin can be so many things, we're creating a show in future called Bitcoin is ... And there's already 18 episodes listed on the website with their own respective topics to unpack. So Bitcoin can be a lot of things, and we want to dive into all those eventually. But today we're keeping it simple. And Eddie, let's kick off with your first point, which is that Bitcoin is freedom. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Bitcoin is freedom. This was the first Bitcoin is that I decided to talk about today. And so here I go. This is a big one. I think that Bitcoin encapsulates freedom very well because for a couple different things. Bitcoin is freedom because you have freedom to see the protocol. So you have visibility into seeing everything that's going on within the network. You also have freedom to join the network and participate in that network, whether you want to send or share Bitcoin or save Bitcoin. But it does also give you that freedom to interact. When I think about, even on previous episodes, we talk about using the legacy system. And that's, I guess, the main point here that I will hit on the head is that, I can't go to the bank and use my funds 365 anytime that I want. But that is very different with Bitcoin. And we can go, more into that in the future. But I think that it is a very good way to explain Bitcoin because you really have full use of the tool and full use of the network. And every day I learn more about, how much I don't know, and that just makes me feel more free. In this network, I can learn more. And make my own decisions. So that's it. Bitcoin is freedom for me.
Powerful, dude. That's a good one. And when you sent that over to me, the first thing I did was sort of look up, like, what does freedom actually mean? I'm really into defining terms before I even think about them, because I think the definition itself, number one, there's usually an array of definitions, and you can often choose which one fits your subjective sort of definition, right? Because at a certain point, definitions are kind of subjective, which one you choose. And so it was the definition I found was the condition of being able to say, think, or do whatever you want without being controlled. And another kind of element of it was the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. And it just kind of made me think that money is really this system of control that literally can enslave us by stealing our time, which is done through arbitrary creation of new money. So I think this whole notion of Bitcoin being freedom really is, for me, ties into Bitcoin unshackling me from the control of the people who are determining what happens with our money, right? Like I was born in Canada. I was kind of born into a system of control, which is the Canadian dollar. I'm free to use US dollars or euros, but those are also their own independent systems of control, and they're all collaborating together to maintain that control. And so Bitcoin really is the freedom, like you said, if you go down to something concrete, the legacy system is like 5 business days until you can access the money that you own, that was given to you. You can't go and take your money out on weekends. And it's so silly, like I think my brother's got a 2-year-old, and I think that when someone says 5 business days, he's going to be like, what does that mean? Like in the context of money, because it's not a thing, right? And even, it's hilarious to see Bitcoin price action happen on weekends sometimes, and the crazy changes that can happen there, because Bitcoin isn't like the New York Stock Exchange that's open like 9 to 4, Monday to Friday. Bitcoin is open 24/7, 365. Anyone can trade at any time. And I think the freedom to do that, and the freedom also to take whatever wealth you've accumulated with you wherever you want to go without anyone telling you that you can't, that's like some legitimate freedom, right? Like, and for us, you live in the United States, I live in Canada, maybe not as big of an issue, but for someone who lives in, I don't know, Afghanistan and needs to leave because it's being war torn and take everything they have with them, it's really hard to do that with like, I don't know what the currency is in Afghanistan, but if you take that currency, it's not going to be worth much elsewhere. And it's really hard to take like gold bars, but it's very easy to take Bitcoin with you. You can do it in 24 words in your brain. And so I think it really is, financial freedom is almost like the base layer of freedom in society. And yeah, that was a really good one. Thanks for suggesting that.
Yeah.
The next one, this was my sort of first one, because, like I said, Bitcoin's a lot of things depending on what context you're looking at, but at a fundamental level, Bitcoin is an objectively better form of money that you must choose. And I think the choose part is really important, right? Because we've never had a choice with money before. And, we just recorded School of Coin episode 3, which is all about what is money. And when I say objectively better, what I mean by that is it's not better because I said it's better or because some other person said it's better. It's better because based on first principles of money and what we covered in the last episode, Bitcoin is engineered to be the best form of money that's ever existed. And, it's a new language to communicate value that was created by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009 and has been increasing in global adoption since. And this form of money is borderless, it's permissionless, it's decentralized, it's censorship resistant, digital money that can't be created out of thin air. It requires someone to expend energy in order to create it, which is part of the reason that it's fair. And that fair system has rules that are transparent, and they apply to everyone on the network equally, regardless of who you are, where you live, how much money you have, how much power and influence you have. You are just like everyone else on the network. And so Bitcoin is really just money for the people that serves as a reliable tool to store human time. So to me, Bitcoin is just the biggest thing is it's objectively better money. And I think that's the point that I tend to bring up first when someone's first exposed to it, because that's the one that's most relevant. And obviously that leads down the rabbit hole of like, what is money? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, I think that's a really good point. And I really like the last point that you mentioned in there. I think it's the most important, that you must choose. Yes. We talk about this. We talked about this in the last episode, on why Bitcoin is and has the opportunity or doesn't have the opportunity. It just is objectively a better money. But then it comes down to, reflecting on your own values and reflecting on your own idea of, what you're going to do with your money and how you're going to, store your time. And so I think that's a really great point, that, we're presented with this information now, learning about money. I learned about money, but then I need to make the decision, to go out and save some money in Bitcoin or do whatever I want to do with it to benefit me. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and Tomo Strolate writes about this a lot, about this whole, that's where I kind of got the concept of it's money you must choose. And that's very important because in order for the price to go up and adoption to increase, people must choose Bitcoin. Some people are going to can choose it out of curiosity. They learn about it and they make a decision voluntarily to choose it. Other people will be forced to choose it. right? When there's no other tool, when you live in Venezuela and what your money's worth today is completely different than tomorrow, it almost forces you to choose it. But I think at the end of the day, in order for Bitcoin to have people choose it, it needs to constantly listen and evolve to reflect the kind of money people want to choose. And so it's cool because it might not evolve quickly, because the whole point with sound money is like, don't break it. It's very important. But like, gold's not evolving. Gold's not changing. Gold is not working to actively get people of planet Earth to choose to use it. Bitcoin is. And so, but I think the big thing there is foundation. It's just an objectively better money. And that alone is an important reason to choose it, because when you understand that money is how you essentially store your time, then using better money becomes very important from both a selfish and a societal perspective for us to coordinate. Next one up, one that Eddie had suggested: Bitcoin is a catapult for learning. Let's hear you unpack that, because that is a juicy one.
Yeah, I keep picking these fun ones. So I wrote a couple, just a couple different topics down, because when I went down the quote unquote rabbit hole that is Bitcoin, you start to go down many different rabbit holes. And so I guess the best way for me to explain this, like, why is it a catapult for learning? When I started learning about Bitcoin, I started learning about economics. I started learning more about mathematics. I started learning about computer science, game theory, politics, savings technology, revolutionary discoveries, paradigm shifts in society. And the reason that I think it's a catapult for learning is because I just, quite frankly, could have cared less about a lot of this stuff before I was learning about Bitcoin. And then, by learning about Bitcoin, I was starting to quote unquote connect the dots, and a lot of these things started to have personal importance for me. So yeah, I mean, it's a catapult for learning because really, as Bitcoin matures, 13 years old now, going on, it's still very young. Like you said, the narrative on its usage has also changed, and it's constantly reflecting, what is the best money out there, based on people's definitions. So I think intertwining itself with literally, almost every aspect of life, it kind of brings you back full circle. And it's like, wow, mathematics is why Bitcoin is so great. And this is also why mathematics is important to me, and it's important to my life. And, economics are very important. And, it might suit me and my future and my family to start learning about this stuff. And so I think, it's really catapulted me to find like resonance and value in a lot of things that I didn't think I had control of prior to.
Yeah, really well said. And I think this whole notion of it being a catapult for learning, like you said, it leads you down a lot of paths, and there are paths that you might not have without a practical application to learn about economics, or to learn about human psychology, or to learn about technology. You might not really go down that path, not because it's uninteresting, because you have no practical way of applying the learning, right? You're not going to read a giant economics textbook without really having either a deep desire to understand economics, or having a curiosity as to how something pieces in, how economics fits with this thing that you're actually interested about. And so I agree, the journey to understand Bitcoin, and it is a journey. The journey actually never ends, because Bitcoin never ends. It's constantly evolving. And it leads you down many paths, like to understand Bitcoin, like you said, is to understand game theory, human psychology, philosophy, technology, governance, values, community, like all of these things. You now have this practical application of all of these disciplines. And, if Bitcoin is the foundational language, if money is the foundational language all of society is built on, it's going to affect all the other elements of society. And so it is really, for the curious individual, Bitcoin is the ultimate rabbit hole that has no bottom. And that can be either overwhelming or it can be exciting. And I think the coolest thing about that is that Bitcoin, not only is it a catapult for learning, it actually rewards you for paying attention. It rewards you for learning in a very major way, which is that you get early access, early adopter status to this good that we're witnessing being monetized in real time. And, you know, people that are alive 30 years from now will be like, wow, it would have been amazing to be alive in 2020 and be able to buy Bitcoin for like $5,000. That's going to seem as crazy as us saying, I can't believe someone paid 10,000 Bitcoins for a pizza. You know, like this is the kind of shit that's going to happen. And so I think not only is it catapult for learning and a gateway to be able to learn about things and create interest in different areas, which are good to know as a human, right? Like understanding, having a grasp on like, what are my values, or like, what does community mean? How do economics apply to my life out of even just self-interest? I think it's good to give people a reason to want to learn, because I think learning has been butchered in terms of how it's done in school, right? Like in high school, I didn't learn, I memorized. I learned how to do good on tests so that I could not fail. In university, I didn't learn, I memorized, right? I didn't actually have any self-directed learning process. It was, here's a menu of shit you have to memorize to do on a test to get the paper that you paid to get. And it's like, that is not learning. That is just literally memorization. And I think learning really has to involve an intrinsic drive to want to learn, but it also involves connecting a bunch of dots, right? It's not just about learning technology and psychology and philosophy. It's like, how do all these things intertwine? And I think Bitcoin is like the ingredient that forms the core of the web and allows you to kind of ping off of all these things, but also maintain a systems view that, oh, they're all connected. And Bitcoin is like the heart of that connection. What was the area of learning that you would have expected yourself to go into least that Bitcoin has guided you towards, just out of curiosity?
Oh man, like economics for sure.
That's boring. Even saying the word is boring as fuck.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like I realized, you know, I think I got a D in my economics class in college just because I just didn't care to even show up, and you know that just showed my like absolute lack of like you said, there was no practical application. You know, I mean, a lot of my friends were economics majors because they wanted a really good job, which I don't blame them. I think it's a great thing to learn, but you know, even thinking about economics, it's like if I would have learned economics, would I have been learning, you know, Keynesian economics? Would I have been learning, you know, Austrian economics? Like what exactly would I have been learning? And like you said, being able to, I love the way that you put that as like a systems view, because I think it's really important to connect dots, and Bitcoin allows me to connect a lot of dots in my life, and it's helping me, like someone who got a D in economics in college, to actually be able to have a somewhat coherent conversation about it, which is exciting to me. So yeah, what about you, Nick?
Yeah, what's funny is you probably understand economics in terms of the truth of economics better than the professor who is supposed to be teaching economics. And, you know, Tomer Stroleit has this article saying that Bitcoin, it's either Bitcoin is a teacher, and I think a catapult for learning is really what a teacher is. And Bitcoin also taught him to be a better teacher. And I think that, you know, being a teacher is a lofty responsibility. It's very important, right? And I think there's like this credo that all teachers should adopt, which is not that you're not there to tell people what they need to know. You're there to stimulate them to want to understand more, and then maybe share what you have with an open mind that you're probably going to learn. You're going to learn reciprocally from them based on their questions. And I think that you having a D in economics says way more about the person teaching you economics and maybe their lack of ability to build interest in why you should give a shit about economics than it does about your intelligence level or your level of motivation.
Yeah.
And so I think that Bitcoin is this beautiful teacher that holds that responsibility magically, because it really does build interest. It makes you more curious. And I think, I'm not going to lie in saying that the number go up factor doesn't influence that, but it's almost like the reward you get for being committed to a process of learning. And it takes it's expensive to get that reward, because you have to pay time, you have to pay attention. And I think time being really the only finite thing, like I was just kind of dabbling in Bitcoin Standard because I haven't read it in a while and I wanted to just like flip through some chapters. And Saifedean talks about how time is really the only resource that is limited, right? Human time. And even saying that gold is a limited resource is really false, right? Because as soon as you add more volume of human time, you will actually extract more gold, right? Like human time spent on technology to figure out better ways to extract gold from either deeper layers of the crust or meteorites or whatever. So it's really just human time is the sole variable that we're working with. And I think when you spend your time on something, you are making a commitment. And by spending time on Bitcoin, you get rewarded with a better understanding of how life works and some universal truths, which I think we're not told and we're actually veered away from. And you get rewarded for that. And I think that's part, like we all react to incentives. And I think Bitcoin has this beautiful incentive to learn and get deeper understanding in so many areas that it's like, the University of Bitcoin is a beautiful free university available to everyone. And I think a catapult for learning was a brilliant point, because it really, I never thought about it until I read what you had messaged me. And I was like, shit, it's so true. You know, so many areas. For me, the area that I probably wouldn't have looked into, or that I definitely wouldn't have looked into if it wasn't for Bitcoin, is really the technology side of understanding like the mathemagic of hashing and, you know, what is the role that technology and coding, like running my own node was a very big exercise and pushed my boundaries of like technological patience, I would say. I mean, shout out to Umbrel for making it so easy that I thought I fucked it up, because I was like, I can't be done right now. Like it was syncing the blockchain. I was like, there's no way I did this right. But I think the technology side, it's actually made me interested in wanting to, like, I've even took a glance at the first piece of code that Satoshi wrote, and I'm like, I don't really know what this says, but I can kind of see, like, I can see where the supply cap is in there. I can see where the halving schedule, like, I can start to read the language that I had no interest in ever learning, because it's actually tangible to me, right? And this whole idea of like verify the code is like, well, I'm not going to verify the code. I don't even speak that language, but it's like, well, I can learn. If I could learn about Bitcoin and understand all that other shit, I could probably learn a little bit about coding, and then it becomes less intimidating and you boost your confidence. And yeah, I think the technology aspect or the coding aspect is something I never expected to even care about, but it's made me more and more interested in it.
So. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and just the one last thing that I'll add on that is that just a lot of this information is like it's made public. You know, you know, Bitcoin is open source, so the code that you were reading, you know, anybody can read, and if they want to. And you know, as far as being a catapult for learning, you know, one thing that really maybe stifled my energy to learn was that, you know, in today's day and age, there are professionals for to help me understand everything. And when I started learning about Bitcoin, you start to retake that responsibility, and you realize, yeah, you know, you can start to wrap your head around things like mathematics and game theory and economics, you know, even someone like me. And so yeah, it's a whole bunch of fun to learn, and it's never ending.
It is. Yeah. If you're curious, it's like an adventure that never ends. It's great. Someone the other day sent me a message and said, did you get so deep down the rabbit hole you can't get out? I'm like, even better. I don't want to get out. It's too fun down there. The next one I had listed was that Bitcoin is protection from time theft. And this is a really sneaky one that I think is actually has lately been the biggest point I bring up when I'm bringing this up with family. Because I'm the annoying guy that has brought up Bitcoin at family dinners for like 5 years. And it went through like fluctuating degrees of interest, usually based on the price or mainstream media or whatever it is. But the biggest point that I try and dial in is that, you know, the reason I kept bringing it up is the equivalent of, I just found out a secret that someone is stealing from my family every day. Every month, someone's stealing money from my family. And I obviously want my family to know this. And I want them to know that it's true and to literally want to take action to stop the theft. And it sounds like that sounds kind of extreme, but the reality is that money creation is time theft. Okay, we work, we take a risk, we give value to the world pays us in money. If the people who control that money are creating more of it out of thin air without even really telling us, then every dollar that we've earned by putting our time into giving value to the world is being diluted. And we've been programmed to think that inflation is this normal thing and it's good, and that our money degrading in purchasing power over time each year is not only okay, but actually desirable. And it's basically like we've all been hypnotized with this spell to the point where we don't question it, to the point where our government actually doesn't tell it. Like, I had to dive really deep to find out what the M2 money supply increase was in Canada from Jan 20 to 21. Because I was like, they got to be printing some shitload of dollars. Like, I'm hearing this here and there. And when I look at it, and they print, like, Canada printed more money in the last year than they had in the previous 40 years combined. That doesn't even sound like a real stat. That sounds like I'm making it up and being an extremist, but this is like factually true. Don't believe me, look it up. Don't trust, verify. And so that's really alarming, because both my parents are past the point of the bulk of their working years. Therefore, the monetary energy they've accumulated by giving their life energy for their entire lives, and oftentimes we sacrifice a lot of our health to earn that energy, is now being stolen from them at a time when they have to rely on that energy for the rest of their life because they're not earning more energy. And it really pissed me off. Like, it really made me angry when I started understanding this. And so I think it's a huge lie that's only allowed to continue because of our cultural sort of financial ignorance. And so by taking responsibility for your financial health, you are becoming immune to the fuckery that governments are doing in stealing our time. And so to me, one of the really, and this is deeply intertwined with Bitcoin is objectively better money, but I think it's its own thing that warrants its own conversation, is that Bitcoin is protection from time theft. And I think we should do an entire episode on inflation, because the word inflation has almost lost most of its meaning, because based on whatever context you use it in, just the CPI is like the biggest joke ever. So we gotta in School of Coin, I think we do an episode on inflation. But what are your thoughts on Bitcoin being time theft? And is that something you think about at all, or something that you find relevant?
Yeah, Nick, I think that it was extremely well put, and I do think it's a very true subject. I think that you communicated it very well. That's one thing that I've maybe I'm still working on myself, being able to communicate that same urgency that I felt last year. I remember digging through. Well, first of all, I remember in 2020, like, hearing people say M1, M2, and then I'm just like, what the F is M1, M2? And then I'm like, okay. And then I talked to my parents about it, and they don't know what it is either. And so, it's really interesting once you start to learn about these different these different things that are going on in society. And I think the one thing that came to my mind when, because I too have parents that are retired and living off of, their hard, my dad was physical labor, my mom was in physical therapy. They worked hard their whole life. And I think on an earlier episode, we talked about pegging your lifestyle. And, when you're of that age, you live your life a certain way, and you like living your life that certain way. But in times like these, when you see a lot of money printing and a lot of inflation, it really is kind of heartbreaking. And yeah, I would love to really dig into inflation on a future episode, because I was just watching, I was on Twitter, where I get a lot of my information, and it's like I was watching this news, this guy being interviewed in the 70s. I think he was probably making, in the US, 18. It doesn't, the numbers don't matter, but prices were going up on things, food, and it's been a topic since the 70s. since 1971. And why is
Right.
it that it's still a topic? I literally was sitting in my front room today, having coffee, listening to people talk about inflation. And I'm like, I wasn't even alive in 1970s, but am I having like deja vu? Because this is just like something that has been talked about for 50 years now. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I think that it's a really touchy subject, and I think it's really important for people to start to think about, because time is the one thing that you can give to yourself, and taking your time away is something that should not happen. And we see it a lot.
Dude, it's like the ultimate fraud and crime that's been going on since 1971. And, we're literally being lied to. And it's really sad that we're being taken advantage of by people who have the control to essentially create as much money as they want without putting work in to do it. And, Preston Pish has which I love listening to. He's just like a super smart dude. And on the topic of inflation, Jeff Booth wrote a book called The Price of Tomorrow. Jeff is going to be on the podcast in December. I'm going to interview him about inflation. So I'm really excited for that. And I'll be learning a lot more about it before then. But Preston Pish talks about how essentially you can give, say, show me 100% inflation. Perfect. I'll find a basket of goods that shows you 100% inflation. Show me 2% inflation. Sure. I'll put together a basket, and essentially what they're doing with CPI is picking what number they want to tell people, whether that reflects or is grounded in reality or not, and then picking a basket that ends up giving them that number. And if that basket excludes the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of accommodation, like home, like what the fuck good is that number? Those are the three most important things in everyone's lives. So if you exclude them and you pick random things like staplers or something, and you come up with 4%, which is still way higher than what people are ready for, it's just like really sad that people are willing to lie to like the masses like that. And I think that the sneaky thing about inflation is that it's kind of sugar coated, right? Like my parents, they're like, inflation's okay. My house went up 30%. And I stare at them. I'm like, do you think 30% is a good rate for your house to go up in 1 year? Do you think that's to me, that's alarming. I'm like, that's called hyperinflation. That's not supposed to happen. And so, they look at it and they're like, well, our assets are going up. So this is good, right? I have more money. My house is worth more. It's great. It's like, okay. But when you sell your house, you get a fixed amount. For the rest of your life, everything else that you must purchase is now that much more expensive too, right? Like maybe real estate outpaces cost of capital by 10%. So your house is actually making 10%. The currency got 20% shittier. Therefore, it looks like you're making 30% per year, which is like, so it's one of those things where it really makes me think, is there an actual reason why I never heard the word inflation in high school? Like, is this why? So that they can continue to do this bullshit? And then part of me is like, well, it kind of seems that way, right? Like that hierarchy of problems, money, governance, education, health, climate, at the superficial level. Well, if money is allowing people to get into governance that are determining what we learn in school to make sure that we never find out the truth about money, we end up on this carousel, like you said, where it's like, am I getting deja vu? Are we like, inflation hasn't stopped being a problem and people accept it as just something that happens, but they don't realize that like there's certain people who are creating that it's a human manufactured phenomena through manipulation of capital. It is not a natural thing. And so, yeah, I think it's like the ultimate shield from time theft that everyone has access to. If you're like someone who works in a grocery store, you have access to the same shield as I do and that you do. And the only price you have to pay for that shield is your time and attention into understanding how this works. And hopefully School of Coin is a tool they can use to acquire that shield. So I think what we're doing is that gives me a shitload of meaning to do these things. I don't know about you, but yeah. Okay. So protection from time theft. The last one that you mentioned, and I really like this, is you initially sent to me, you said a bridge for gaps. And we kind of like boiled it down to Bitcoin is a universal constant. And I would love for you to unpack that a little bit and then we'll riff on it because I think it's a powerful one.
Yeah, this one was really fun. It was fun just going back and forth earlier today. But these were kind of my thoughts, is that I guess I will first start out with just my own personal journey and, finding truth within the world. In today's day and age, and you can, everybody can probably relate with this too. It seems to me like there's always, when you're learning about something, there's like two opinions. There's like, oh, well, you could be the red opinion or the blue opinion, or, you're either a Democrat or Republican, or, there's this way to eat, you could eat meat, or, you could be a carnivore, you could be a vegan, and I'm just like, in my head, I'm always like, there's got to be one way that makes sense, because we're all human in the end. And so it's kind of been my life goal to really hang on to things that are universal and things that I can relate to with anybody that I'm talking to. And so, in today's day and age, I think that Bitcoin is a really, really great universal constant where there is a lot of divisiveness and separation in opinion. Bitcoin is something where humanity can find agreements, and there isn't two different Bitcoins and two different systems. It's one protocol, and it makes a lot of sense when you learn about the fundamentals of it, and you can choose to opt into it. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. States, me in Canada, a guy living in India, or a person living in China. We all are able to evaluate the same constant, which allows us to interoperably sort of communicate. If someone in China is using a Chinese app and I'm using a Canadian app, and those apps are second layers on this layer of finance, with this base layer protocol, then it connects us in ways that kind of like the internet connected us, right? And you're right, there's so many things that exist these days to disconnect us, right? For whatever reason, whether that's like this divisiveness in you're either in this camp or this camp, or whatever it may be. And I think truth is like, everyone has to discover their own truth. And oftentimes your perspective of truth is based on the information you've had access to, or your willingness to actually engage with the process of critical thinking. And I think there's not that many people that have the tools to actually think critically about things, or have the desire to learn about, the world is super complex. It's gotten so complex that I think it actually exceeds the human capacity for being able to understand things, because there's so many distractions. Oftentimes truth is not necessarily hidden. It's just buried under so much bullshit that it becomes impossible to find. And I think, Bitcoin is the lighthouse that shines regardless of how much noise there is, right? If you think of noise like fog, even on a foggy day, you can see the lighthouse, and you can, share where the lighthouse is with someone else, not by saying the lighthouse is there, but by saying, hey, do you see that light over there? Yes. Okay. Well, that's the lighthouse, and it's really, you get to offer people the opportunity to learn about Bitcoin for themselves and determine truth for themselves, because that it's a universal constant. It is not, yes, they can get off track, and yes, there's going to be people convincing them that all these other things are money. But at the end of the day, if someone puts in the due diligence, it's easy to see that the constant is Bitcoin. The constant is protocol, this base layer protocol for fair global money. And yeah, I like that notion, as because some of the things on that list of Bitcoin is ... in terms of show episodes, like two of them that are on there is Bitcoin is truth and Bitcoin is reality. And I really like the reality piece, because I think economists today and people who are running the show in terms of how much money is getting created are completely disconnected with reality, and don't actually understand the second, third, fourth order effects of what they're doing. They're literally just like, we need to make this thing not break tomorrow, so we're going to do this, and I probably won't even be in this position by the time it breaks, so I'm just going to let the next person deal with the breakage. And when that gets done enough times, and we just kind of pass on the buck of the breakage to the next person, it costs everyone a lot in terms of suffering, right? When money fails, and my honest hope in my heart is that money does not fail, is that we end up going through this smooth transition period where Bitcoin starts to hold these money creators accountable so that they can't do as much bullshit, which will give some pain, right? Like we have to experience some pain in order for us not to implode. And my hope is that Bitcoin will be a rebalancer and sort of usher us into a new age of money, and not just like, I don't want the fiat money to implode, because the entire world, like when money fails, it's very ugly. Like I hope we never get there, but I really think that I hope that the money creators get held accountable. I hope that power gets redistributed so that the people now have some way of defending themselves and actually like opting out of the bullshit control systems that have been created. And it makes me feel really good that this is a constant. This thing is not changing. This is like the anchor that I know I can go back and find if I get confused. And yeah, I think viewing Bitcoin as sort of a universal constant is a really powerful way to frame the concept. So the last one I had, and this is a pretty heavy one for me, and it relates a lot to our work that we've done together in the world of health. And it's that Bitcoin is responsibility. And I heard Gabor Mate, who's a fellow Canadian working in kind of the addiction space of health. I heard him break down responsibility one time on a podcast. I thought it was brilliant. And he breaks it down to response able. In order to take responsibility, you have to have the ability to respond to the problem. And you have to have an understanding of the problem and have some tools that you can apply. And so Bitcoin is a tool that enables individuals to respond to the problem of broken money that steals from them. And I think that's really powerful. And not only that, but responsibility is kind of built into the protocol of Bitcoin, right? Like to learn, the only way to really get involved with Bitcoin is to learn how to acquire and store Bitcoin securely. Like that's the cost of admission to the network. And in the true ethos of Bitcoin, like that knowledge cannot be outsourced or delegated to someone else, right? Like you can seek other people to contribute to your knowledge, but someone can't learn how Bitcoin works for you and buy Bitcoin for you and store Bitcoin for you, because they're probably going to steal your Bitcoin. Right. And so I think responsibility, like when someone says responsibility, what does that make you, what ideas or thoughts does that evoke for you?
Yeah, well, it just makes me, responsibility makes me reflect back on myself. When I think about being responsible, I first think about being a kid and the joy of, or the innocence of experiencing the lack of responsibility, maybe personal responsibility, maybe emotional responsibility and things like that. But, when I think of responsibility now, I as an adult, I think about my emotional well-being, my health, my financial well-being, the different commitments I make to other people. And I think that it might have been in an earlier episode, you and I were having a conversation about the current system and its ability for people to basically avoid responsibility, decision makers making decisions, but not having to be held accountable, or like accountability, and I think that, in terms of, responsibility, Bitcoin gives a great opportunity to be accountable for every decision and every action that you make, because of the nature of the protocol, because that it is, you can access it 24/7, because it is truth, because, the ledger has been, stamped on the blockchain since the beginning of Bitcoin. It's inherently responsible for itself. And so, that, to me, that deep rooted sense of responsibility is, like you said, it's this guiding light. It's going to shine through the noise. It's going to push through all of that other noise. And, and hopefully it can land on your plate, and you can take responsibility, of it in your own life, or, in my own life, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And I think when we look at responsibility, I think there's a lot of ways where society has engineered ways for us to forfeit responsibility. I like health was the most blatant demonstration of this for me, right? I go through physio school and I'm taught that people need to come see me to get fixed, right? It's my responsibility to fix others, the problems that others are facing with their physical body. And it's kind of this bullshit that essentially is taught to you, but it's actually not true, right? I cannot be responsible. The only person that can be responsible for their own health is the individual. And I think our medical system is fundamentally disempowering and removes responsibility, right? Oh, you've lived unhealthily because number one, you probably weren't taught. I don't think we're even given the tools to take responsibility for our health, to be quite frank. So this is not an individual, the problem of being unhealthy does not lie completely on the individual. There's a societal element of that society has to take some ownership and accountability for the fact that people aren't given tools to be responsible for their health. But when someone begins to understand or is told that they can and should begin taking responsibility and taking ownership for their health, all of a sudden there's an impetus to say, well, I can't just take this drug to cover up my shitty lifestyle, right? I can't just take this drug to suppress the symptoms of this disease. I actually have to own the fact that I'm doing this shit to myself and that I can't just forfeit responsibility to a pill or to a doctor or to a surgery. And I think the metaphor to finance is that, when you give your money to the bank, you're trusting them that they're going to take care of your money, right? When you allow someone else to determine how your money that you're using gets created, you're kind of putting yourself at risk to the fact that they might be messing with your money and not telling you. And I think part of responsibility is actually scary, right? Like it's scary to think that you are fully and wholly responsible for your health. It's scary to think that you are fully and wholly responsible for managing your wealth, right? Like if you lose your keys to $1 million worth of Bitcoin, no one's going to help you. No one's going to bail you out. This is like the distinction between full responsibility. There will be Bitcoin banks that will say, oh, we'll hold your Bitcoin. Probably they're going to try and steal it after enough time, whether that's taking like little fees or like, I don't know, getting hacked or I don't know. But I think this whole notion that, and you see this with people you see this with Bitcoiners, right? It's this like philosophy of taking responsibility. Typically, there are people who are working to improve their understanding of health, working to improve their understanding of economics and psychology and philosophy. And they're taking responsibility actively by learning. And the reason they're able to do that is because they're not having their time stolen anymore. Therefore, they have more time to learn and take responsibility, right? And it's like this vicious positive feedback loop, which usually on the other side is negative, right? You use fiat, you're constantly getting your time stolen, you have less time, you have to weed out things that you no longer have time for, like taking care of yourself, like learning about how money works. I don't have time for that. I'm just trying to survive and pay my mortgage and feed my kids and like I'm just trying to stay afloat. And when you get off that Ferris wheel by just allocating some time towards starting to understand this and acquiring some Bitcoin and slowly putting more and more of your wealth into something that doesn't allow your time to be stolen, you rediscover a bunch of time, which then refacilitates taking more responsibility through learning. So I think it's this really, I think Bitcoin is responsibility is like a really powerful one for me because I know that it's made me take a lot more responsibility for my own personal finances. And I'm seeing people in my family and friend network taking more responsibility, like seeing that they actually have a chance to take more responsibility. Because before there wasn't even like the choice wasn't there before. And so, yeah, just the fact that you can't cheat. You can't take the easy path with Bitcoin because there is not really any easy path. There is just the path of constantly improving your understanding to increase how effective that shield is for you. So,
yeah, I think that was really well said, and it just like goes to show how it might feel so big, this responsibility at first, but it's not as overwhelming as I thought. And once you are able to start to regain a sense of true responsibility for your health or your finances, like in the case of Bitcoin, You really like, I mean, at least for me, like start to experience like levels of freedom and happiness that I forgot about for a little while. And it just kind of goes back to like my really like my journey in discovering Bitcoin, and like the importance of it was, you know, I was at a lower point in my life where I needed to take responsibility for my health and take responsibility for my happiness. And I logically came to money and finances in that process. And I'm very grateful for the you know, the opportunity in like my journey to take responsibility back to regain it in that space. I think that was really well said, Nick.
Yeah, I think when you take responsibility back, you're taking your power back, right? Like we've kind of gotten accustomed to only certain people having power, and then we're just like kind of doing our best to cope with the fact that that power often affects us in some way. And I think taking responsibility doesn't mean you do it without mistakes, right? I think it was Gigi was saying that, you know, humans learn through either curiosity or through pain. And on the path to taking more responsibility, there's often a lot of pain, right? There's often a lot of elements that you screw up certain things, you learn those lessons. And the cool thing is that I think the Bitcoin space has evolved so much that there's so many people out there donating their time, creating amazing content that allows us to be easier to understand, so that taking responsibility is easier now in terms of the financial world than it ever has been before. And, you know, our mission at TFC was do everything we can to help people reclaim responsibility for their health by creating content that's free and accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Even if you can't pay, it's there. And so I think the ease of taking responsibility, like to navigate Bitcoin like 5 years ago, was like orders of magnitude harder. And so, you know, for people who are intimidated by this notion of Bitcoin, having to learn about all these different elements, like you go at it at your own pace. And actually, by starting to learn about something you didn't think you had any business or ability to learn about, and realizing it's actually not as scary as I thought, you end up building this confidence that brings you forward into taking more responsibility. And, you know, there's points in time that I know for me that I've kind of like stretched my learning ability so far that I got overwhelmed and I had to kind of backtrack a bit. And that's part of the journey of taking responsibility. That's not a failure. It's simply like, oh, okay, that's beyond what I can do right now. And I think that understanding Bitcoin is actually packed into the word taking care of yourself, because it's taking care of making sure that the energy you expend into the world is safe. And I think that is, you know, it's pretty damn cool because it can't be stopped. Like to try and bet against the human desire to learn and to seek happiness and to preserve what's rightfully theirs, you're betting against the wrong thing. People creating money out of nowhere, you're betting against something that you're like, I think they've already lost. They just don't know it yet. And they're going to fight until the last minute. But the cool thing is like everyone with an internet connection now has the ability to fight back through understanding and through encryption. And it's pretty cool. So to kind of summarize, our 6 points were: Bitcoin is freedom. Bitcoin is objectively better money. Bitcoin is a catapult for learning. Bitcoin is protection from time theft. Bitcoin is a universal constant, and Bitcoin is responsibility. So any final thoughts or stuff that you want to put out there, Eddie, before we wrap this sucker up?
Yeah, Nick, it was so much fun today taking charge to define what is Bitcoin with you. And you know, I was kind of surprised with a lot of the really good conversation that was pulled out of these 6 topics. But yeah, I mean, I look forward to continuing to define what is Bitcoin to me and sharing that with everybody else, and going along this discovery process for the world's greatest money, Bitcoin. So yeah, it was a lot of fun talking about Bitcoin today.
Yeah. And I think Bitcoin I think everyone needs to work on defining what Bitcoin is to them, right? These were kind of what Bitcoin is to us. And obviously a lot of these things we see apply to other people. But at the end of the day, what Bitcoin is to me has changed over time. It's also multiplied over time in terms of like the amount of different meanings that Bitcoin can carry. And I looked at the initial skeleton of this episode last night before dinner. And I went on a 2-hour walk last night because I was like, I have no idea what I should say, because I can't say 18 freaking things of what Bitcoin is. We need to choose the most salient ones for this audience. And this audience for School of Coin is people that are just getting into Bitcoin. And so I hope at least that we did a pretty good job at laying out the relevant ones for them to know at this point in their journey. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your motivation to learn how to take back financial responsibility. If you enjoy the content, you can support the project by heading to bitcoinstoa.com and sending some sats to the QR code on the homepage when and if you do acquire sats. And so I think the next episode is how to start sacking sats. And I think at this point, if you're interested, I think it's important to start getting touch points and engaging with it, even at a low level. It might be $5 worth of Bitcoin that you acquire or that you get from someone that is a Bitcoiner, and starting to kind of interact with the protocol, see what this magic internet money actually does firsthand on the ground. And then we'll go into, I think we're going to go into wallets after that, but we got a lot more School of Coin episodes to come. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you find this a good use of your time. And we welcome any and all feedback, whether that's on YouTube or you can email bitcoinstoa@gmail.com. We love feedback. That's what helps us get better. And yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Ciao.